5 years ago, my mother called me 3 days before Thanksgiving and said 7 words that shattered everything I thought I knew about family. Don't come home this year. Amber doesn't want drama. My name is Callie Brennan. I'm 32 years old. No explanation, no apology, just a door slammed shut on 27 years of trying to belong. I spent that Thanksgiving alone at a restaurant in Chicago, watching happy families laugh together while I fought back tears over a cold turkey dinner. I had no idea that the strangers at the next table would become the family I'd always dreamed of. I had no idea that 5 years later they'd be introduced at my wedding as the parents of the bride, while my biological parents stood watching uninvited, realizing they'd been replaced in every way that matters. Before I tell you what happened, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if this story resonates with you. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. I read every single one. I remember exactly where I was standing when my phone rang. November 21st, 3 days before Thanksgiving. I was in my tiny studio apartment in Chicago, surrounded by half-packed bags and the scent of the pumpkin candle I'd lit to get myself in the holiday spirit. I'd already bought my train ticket home to Indianapolis. Non-refundable, of course. Mom's name flashed on my screen. I smiled and picked up. "Hey, Mom, I was just about to..." "Callie." Her voice was flat, cold. "I need to tell you something." My stomach dropped. That tone never meant anything good. "What's wrong? Is Dad okay?" "Your father's fine." A pause. "Listen, I've been thinking, don't come home this year." I actually laughed. I thought she was joking. "What do you mean?" "Amber doesn't want drama. She's pregnant again and she doesn't need the stress." I gripped the phone tighter. "Drama? What drama? I haven't even talked to Amber in months." "Exactly." Mom's voice hardened. "And let's keep it that way. You know how you get." "How I get?" "Mom, I literally just asked her last year why she didn't invite me to her baby shower. That's not drama. That's a question." "See, that's exactly what I mean. You always make everything about you." I stood there frozen, watching the snow fall outside my window. 27 years old, and my mother was telling me I wasn't welcome at Thanksgiving because I'd once asked why I was excluded. "Mom, I already bought my ticket." "Then get a refund." Her tone left no room for negotiation. "Amber is pregnant. She doesn't need stress. You understand." The line went dead. I understood perfectly. I'd always been the acceptable sacrifice. I wish I could say this was the first time. But as I sat on the edge of my bed staring at my useless train ticket, the memories came flooding back like a highlight reel of disappointment. My 16th birthday. I'd been planning it for months, a small gathering with my 3 closest friends. Mom promised we'd have cake and go bowling. But the morning of, Amber called crying because she'd failed her chemistry final and needed emotional support. My party was canceled. We spent the day consoling my sister instead. "Don't be dramatic, Callie. Your sister needs us right now. You can celebrate next weekend." We never did. Then there was my college graduation. I'd worked so hard for that moment, 4 years of late nights, part-time jobs, scraping by on ramen. I was the first person in my family to graduate with honors. When I walked across that stage, I looked for my parents in the crowd. Their seats were empty. They showed up 2 hours late. Amber had a routine prenatal checkup that couldn't be rescheduled. "You understand, sweetheart. Your sister's baby is more important than a ceremony." More important than me. That's what she meant. That's what she always meant. I learned early that complaining only made things worse. Don't be so sensitive. Stop making everything about yourself. Why can't you just be happy for your sister? So I stopped complaining. I became smaller, quieter. I thought if I was agreeable enough, easy enough, invisible enough, maybe then I'd finally earn their love. I was 27 years old, sitting in a cold apartment with a worthless train ticket, and I finally realized the truth. There was no amount of small that would ever be small enough. I called my father. I don't know what I expected. Maybe some small part of me still believed he'd stand up for me just this once. The phone rang 4 times before he answered. "Hey, kiddo." His voice was cautious. He already knew. "Dad, did Mom tell you?" A long pause. I could hear the TV in the background, probably a football game. "She mentioned it. And you're okay with this? You don't think I should be allowed at Thanksgiving with my own family? You know how your mother is, Callie. She's just trying to keep the peace by excluding me. Dad, do you want me there?" 5 seconds passed. 10. He cleared his throat. "I think it's better if you listen to your mother this year." Something inside me went quiet. Not sad, not angry, just empty. "Okay, Dad." "Callie, don't be like..." I hung up. He didn't call back. He was always in the middle. I realized he'd just always chosen to stand on their side. But as the darkness settled in, something else settled too. A quiet decision. If I wasn't welcome at their table, I'd make my own Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving Day arrived gray and cold. I woke up in my studio to the sound of my neighbor's family arriving. Footsteps overhead, children laughing, the muffled warmth of voices I couldn't make out. Someone was making stuffing. I made instant coffee and sat by the window, watching the snow fall on the empty street below. My phone stayed silent all morning. No calls, no texts, not even a happy Thanksgiving from anyone in my family. Around noon, I made the mistake of opening Instagram. Amber had posted a photo. The whole family around the dining table, Mom, Dad, Amber, her husband, Brad, their 2-year-old in a tiny turkey sweater. Everyone smiling. The caption read, "So grateful for my family. These are the people who matter most." I zoomed in, counted the place settings, 4 adults, 1 toddler, 5 chairs. There wasn't even an empty seat where I should have been. They hadn't just excluded me. They'd erased me like I'd never existed at all. I closed the app, stared at the ceiling. Then I grabbed my coat. If I was going to eat Thanksgiving dinner alone, I was going to do it somewhere with actual food, with light, with life. The Lakeside Grill was one of those old Chicago institutions. Dark wood, brass fixtures, cloth napkins, and candles on every table. More importantly, it was one of the few restaurants in the city that stayed open on Thanksgiving. When I pushed through the door, the warmth hit me like a wave. The smell of roasted turkey and fresh bread, the soft clink of glasses, and everywhere, families. The restaurant hummed with the sound of people who belonged somewhere. The hostess looked at me with barely concealed pity. "Just one tonight." Just one. She led me to a tiny 2-top in the corner, squeezed between the kitchen door and a large family that had pushed 3 tables together. The family next to me was celebrating hard. An older couple at the head of the table, probably in their late 60s. A middle-aged man with his wife and 2 kids. And a younger man, around 30, who kept making everyone laugh. 3 generations, easy. They passed dishes back and forth without asking. They interrupted each other in the way that only people who truly love each other can. I watched them out of the corner of my eye and felt something crack open in my chest. This is what family is supposed to look like. My turkey arrived. Golden skin, cranberry sauce, a perfect scoop of mashed potatoes. It looked like a magazine photo. I couldn't taste any of it. I sat there pushing food around my plate, and suddenly I understood something I'd been avoiding for 27 years. This wasn't about Thanksgiving. This wasn't about Amber's pregnancy or Mom's need for peace. This was about a pattern so deep it had shaped my entire life. I had spent 27 years trying to earn a place at their table, bending myself into smaller and smaller shapes, swallowing my hurt, apologizing for having feelings. And what had it gotten me? A corner table, a meal alone, an Instagram photo with no empty chair. The tears came before I could stop them. "Honey!" I froze, a woman's voice, warm, concerned. I looked up. The older woman from the family next to me was standing beside my table. Silver hair, kind eyes, a face that somehow looked like it had spent a lifetime actually listening to people. She was looking at me like I mattered. "I'm fine," I said automatically. "Just allergies." The woman raised one eyebrow, not judging, just knowing. Allergies don't usually make people cry into their napkin on Thanksgiving. I let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. That obvious? Only to someone who's paying attention. She had a gentle voice, but steel underneath. I'm Carol. Callie. Well, Callie, no one should eat alone on this day. Why don't you come join us? I shook my head immediately. Oh no, I couldn't. I don't want to intrude. You're not intruding, I'm inviting, she smiled. There's a difference. My husband tells terrible jokes, she continued as if I hadn't spoken. And my son Nathan keeps trying to start political debates. You might as well come suffer with us at the big table. The older man, her husband, I assumed, waved at me. She won't take no for an answer. Trust me, 43 years and I've never won an argument. I looked at my cold turkey, my empty table, my napkins still damp with tears. Then I looked at Carol Hartwell and her warm eyes and her family that somehow had room for a stranger. Okay, I heard myself say. If you're sure. I'm sure. Come on, we just opened another bottle of wine and there's way too much pie. I stood up on shaky legs and followed her to the table, not knowing that this single moment, this small act of kindness from a woman I'd never met, was about to change the entire trajectory of my life. They made room for me like I'd always been there. Someone pulled up a chair. Someone else handed me a plate. Before I could even sit down, I had a glass of wine in my hand and a warm roll on my plate. I'm Tom, the older man said, shaking my hand. This is my wife Carol, our son Daniel, his wife Sarah, their kids Lily and Owen, and our youngest Nathan. Before I could even answer, Daniel was passing me the mashed potatoes and asking what I did for work. Sarah was laughing. Lily, who looked about 8, was explaining that stick figures were easy. Owen had already fallen asleep on his mother's arm. Tom cleared his throat, the unmistakable pre-joke intake of breath. What did the turkey say to the computer? Dad, no, Daniel groaned. Google, Google, Google. The kids burst into giggles. Sarah rolled her eyes. Nathan shook his head across the table at me as if to say I warned you. And I actually laughed, a real laugh, for the first time all day. Tom raised his wine glass. A toast to unexpected guests who make our table complete. Everyone raised their glasses, including me. I looked around at these people, strangers, all of them, until 15 minutes ago, and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Warmth. Acceptance. Belonging. I didn't know families could feel like this. After the main course, Carol moved to the chair next to mine. How are you doing? She asked quietly. Really? Something about her directness made me want to be honest. My mom called me 3 days ago, I finally said. Told me not to come home for Thanksgiving. My sister is pregnant and she didn't want drama. That's what they call it when I ask questions they don't want to answer. Carol nodded slowly. It's fine, I added quickly. I mean, it's not fine, but it's... Callie. Carol's voice was gentle but firm. Can I tell you something I learned in 30 years as a family attorney? You're a lawyer. Retired family law, she smiled. I've seen every kind of family dysfunction you can imagine. And I've learned that the people who accuse you of causing drama are usually the ones creating it. They just need someone to blame. The words hit me like a physical force. You're not the problem, Callie, Carol said, putting her hand over mine. You never were. I couldn't speak. I could barely breathe. Those were the words I'd needed to hear my entire life. If you're watching this, and you've ever been blamed for causing drama just because you asked to be treated fairly, I see you. Have you ever been made the scapegoat in your family? Type your answer in the comments. And if this story is hitting close to home, please hit that like button so more people can find it. When the check came, Tom waved off my wallet. Consider it a Thanksgiving tradition, he said. We always buy dinner for new friends. As we gathered our coats, Carol pressed something into my hand, a small cream-colored card. Carol Hartwell, J.D., Family Law, retired. A phone number and an address in Lincoln Park. If you ever need to talk, call me. I mean it. Tom appeared beside us. Sunday dinners every week at our place. You're welcome anytime. Nathan was already by the door. Mom never says things she doesn't mean, trust me. Family isn't blood, Callie. Carol squeezed my hand. It's showing up. I didn't go to Sunday dinner the next week, or the week after that. It felt too strange, too forward, too much like imposing. But Carol called just to check in, just to see how I was doing. By early December, I finally accepted the invitation. That first Sunday, I stood on the Hartwell's porch in Lincoln Park for 5 full minutes before I worked up the courage to knock. The house was exactly what I'd imagined, a beautiful craftsman with a wide front porch and lights in every window. It looked like the kind of place where good things happened. Carol opened the door before I could change my mind. "There you are." She pulled me into a hug like it was the most natural thing in the world. "We saved you a seat." That was the first of many Sundays. Over the next 6 months, I became a regular at the Hartwell table. Tom taught me chess. I lost every game. Carol shared her secret pie crust recipe, the one she swore she'd never written down. Daniel's kids started calling me Aunt Callie without anyone telling them to. And Nathan and I became real friends, the kind who texted random thoughts at 2 a.m. and argued about movies and sat next to each other at dinner without anyone having to arrange it. I didn't hear from my biological family once. Not a call, not a text, not even a Christmas card. For the first time in my life, I stopped noticing, because for the first time, I wasn't performing for love. I was just loved. It felt like finally coming home. One spring afternoon, Carol and I were sitting on her back porch. The garden was just starting to bloom, tulips pushing up through the soil, birds fighting over the feeder. Tom and Nathan were inside shouting at a baseball game on TV. "Have you heard from your parents?" Carol asked. "No, and I haven't reached out either." "Do you want to?" I thought about it, really thought about it. Sometimes in the middle of the night, I'll think about calling my mom. But then I remember there's nothing to explain. She knows what she did. She just doesn't think it was wrong. Carol took a sip of her tea. "In my career, I helped a lot of people find legal recognition for the families they'd built, not the ones they were born into." "What do you mean?" She smiled, soft, knowing. "Just that the law recognizes what the heart already knows. That family can be created, not just inherited. There are ways to make those bonds official if a person wants to." I didn't fully understand what she was hinting at. Not yet. "Something to think about," Carol said. "Whenever you're ready." She patted my hand and changed the subject to her tomato plants. But her words stayed with me. They would take root slowly and bloom at exactly the right time. It happened so naturally that I almost didn't notice it happening. 2 years after that first Thanksgiving, Nathan and I weren't just friends anymore. We were something more, something that had grown so gradually that, when we finally acknowledged it, it felt less like a beginning and more like a recognition of what had always been there. He asked me to dinner at the Lakeside Grill, the same restaurant where we'd met. "This feels circular," I said, sliding into the booth. "That's the point." He was nervous. I could tell by the way he kept adjusting his napkin. "Callie, I've been trying to figure out how to say this for months." He took a breath. "I want to spend the rest of my life choosing you, every single day." My heart stopped. "I know your family hurt you. I know you're scared of people who are supposed to love you letting you down." His eyes were steady on mine. "But I'm not going anywhere. I never have been." He pulled out a small velvet box. "Callie Brennan, will you marry me?" I looked at this man who'd been my friend first, my confidant second, my rock through 2 years of healing, and I saw my future. "Yes," I whispered. "Yes." He slipped the ring on my finger. The restaurant erupted in applause. And then I saw them in the corner booth. Tom and Carol, champagne already poured, beaming like they'd known all along. "Mom couldn't resist," Nathan laughed. I was going to officially become a Hartwell. The wedding planning began immediately. And one question kept me up at night. The invitations would need a line, parents of the bride, Robert and Linda Brennan. They hadn't spoken to me in over 2 years, hadn't called on my birthday, hadn't acknowledged my existence. I couldn't put their names on my wedding invitation. They hadn't earned that honor. I was pacing in the Hartwells' living room one evening when Carol found me. I told her about the impossible line I couldn't figure out how to fill. Carol sat down and patted the cushion beside her. "There's something I mentioned once about legal recognition for chosen family. Do you remember?" "Adult adoption," Carol said gently. "It's a legal process where a consenting adult is formally adopted by another family. It creates a legal parent-child relationship, new birth certificate, new legal next-of-kin status. Everything. That's a real thing. Very real. I've helped many people through the process." I looked at this woman who'd pulled me into her family on the loneliest night of my life, who'd fed me Sunday dinners and taught me about pie crust and shown me what a mother could be. "Carol," my voice cracked, "would you and Tom consider—" She pulled me into her arms before I could finish the sentence. "We've considered you our daughter since the first Thanksgiving," she whispered. "We were just waiting for you to be ready." When the judge signed the final order, I legally became Callie Hartwell. We sent out invitations with the line I'd agonized over, now proudly printed: parents of the bride Tom and Carol Hartwell, the family who chose her. 3 months before the wedding, my phone buzzed with a text from Amber, the first message in nearly 3 years. "Did you know Callie is getting married?" I stared at the screen. Then I blocked the number. A week later, my mother called 5 times in one day. I let every call go to voicemail. Finally, a text. "Why didn't you tell us? We're your family. Call me back immediately." I read it twice. Then I deleted it. 3 years of silence, and now, suddenly, they remembered they had another daughter. I wasn't angry. I'd moved past anger long ago. I was just tired. She showed up at my apartment on a Tuesday afternoon. I was reviewing design proofs at my kitchen table when the doorbell rang. I opened it without checking the peephole, a mistake I wouldn't make again. "Callie!" My mother stood in my hallway. She looked older than I remembered, grayer, more tired, but her eyes held the same disappointed expression I'd spent my childhood trying to erase. "What are you doing here?" "What am I doing here? You're getting married without telling your own mother. We haven't spoken in 3 years. And whose fault is that?" I closed the door slowly, counted to 5. "Yours. You told me not to come home. That was one Thanksgiving. You can't still be upset about that." "I'm not upset." I kept my voice calm. "I've moved on." Her eyes swept across my living room, landing on the photos on my bookshelf. Me and Nathan at a beach. Me and Carol making pie. The whole Hartwell family at Christmas, me right in the center. "Who are these people?" "My family. I am your family." "You were." I met her gaze evenly. "You chose not to be. Remember, Amber didn't want drama. I want an invitation to the wedding." "No." Her jaw dropped. "You heard me." I walked to the door and opened it. "You don't get to erase me and then demand a seat at my table." The wedding day dawned golden and perfect. June in Napa Valley, a vineyard with rolling hills and endless rows of grapevines. An outdoor ceremony, a reception in a beautiful stone barn, everything decorated with white roses and greenery. In the bridal suite, I stood before a full-length mirror while Carol adjusted my veil. "You look beautiful," she said softly. "Absolutely beautiful." I looked at my reflection. The woman looking back at me was calmer, stronger than the girl who'd sat alone in a restaurant 5 years ago. That girl hadn't believed she deserved to be loved. This woman knew better. On the vanity sat a copy of the wedding program. I picked it up, reading the line I'd never thought I'd be able to write. Parents of the bride, Tom and Carol Hartwell, the family who chose her. Carol put her hands on my shoulders. "Whatever happens today, you have a family who chose you. We will always choose you." I hugged her tight. "I love you, Mom." It was the first time I'd called her that. The word came out naturally, like it had always been waiting. Carol's eyes glistened. "I love you too, sweetheart. My daughter." The ceremony was everything I'd dreamed of. Nathan waiting at the end of the aisle. Tom walking me toward him, steady and proud. The vows we'd written ourselves, words that made half the guests cry and the other half pretend they weren't. When Nathan slipped the ring on my finger and the officiant pronounced us husband and wife, I felt something click into place. Like the last piece of a puzzle I'd been trying to solve my entire life. The reception was in full swing when the security guard found me. "Mrs. Hartwell, there are 2 people at the entrance. They claim to be your parents." I'd expected this. Part of me had been waiting for it all day. "Let them in," I told the security guard. "But don't seat them with the family. Put them in the back." Nathan raised an eyebrow. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure. Let them see. Let them see what they lost. Let them see the family who stepped up when they stepped away. Let them witness the life I built without them." The MC stepped up to the microphone. The music softened. "Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention before we continue the celebration, I'd like to introduce some very special people." I watched my biological parents from across the room. Linda was craning her neck, trying to see. Robert stood behind her, hands in his pockets, looking uncomfortable. They had no idea what was coming. "Please join me in welcoming the parents of the bride." Linda straightened up. I could see her preparing to step forward. "Tom and Carol Hartwell." The room erupted in applause. Tom and Carol stood from the head table, beaming, waving to the guests. People cheered. Someone whistled. The photographer snapped photos. And across the room, my mother's face went white. I watched it happen in slow motion. The confusion, the disbelief. The moment she realized what those words meant. To everyone in this room, Tom and Carol Hartwell were simply what they appeared to be. My parents. If you were in my shoes, would you have let your biological parents into your wedding? Type yes or no in the comments. I want to know what you would have done. And if you're dying to see what happens next, make sure you're subscribed with notifications on. Linda pushed through the crowd. She reached me just as the applause was dying down, her face flushed, her eyes wild. Robert trailed behind her. "What is going on? Who are those people?" "My legal parents. I was adopted 2 years ago." "You," she staggered back, "you can't just replace us." "I didn't replace you, you abandoned me first." "We never abandoned you. You told me not to come home, you chose Amber. Every time for 27 years. Nathan moved to my side, a solid, quiet presence. The guests nearest to us had noticed. Conversations died. Heads turned. "That's not fair," Linda started. "Fair? You want to talk about fair? I spent 27 years trying to earn a place in your family. I got an Instagram photo with no empty chair. A Thanksgiving dinner alone, 3 years of silence. I'm still your mother. Not legally." I held up my left hand, both rings glinting. "Not emotionally, not anymore. This is humiliating," she hissed. "Then leave." My voice was soft, final. "You showed up uninvited to my wedding. You don't get to be the victim here." She stared at me like she was seeing a stranger. Maybe she was. The daughter who never fought back had finally stopped shrinking. And then, for the first time in my entire life, my father spoke up. "Callie," his voice was rough, broken. "I'm sorry." I turned to look at him, really look at him. Robert Brennan had aged more than 5 years should account for. But his eyes were wet with tears. I had never seen my father cry, not once in 27 years. "I should have done better. I knew how your mother treated you, how Amber treated you, and I stood there. I let it happen. You were my daughter, my little girl, and I let them make you feel like you didn't matter." A tear rolled down his cheek. "I'm so sorry." The words I'd waited 3 decades to hear, and they came too late. "I know you're sorry, Dad." My voice was gentle but firm. "But sorry doesn't undo the years you stood by and watched." Carol appeared at my shoulder, just her hand on my arm. A quiet reminder that I wasn't alone. Linda glared at Carol. "You're the one who stole my daughter." Carol's expression didn't change. "I didn't steal anything, Mrs. Brennan." Tom stepped forward. In all the years I'd known him, I'd never once heard him raise his voice. But when he spoke now, there was steel in his tone that silenced everyone. "I think it's time for you folks to leave. Who are you to tell us?" "I'm her father." Tom's voice carried across the quiet reception. Legally and in every way that matters. You stole our daughter. Tom shook his head, calm, certain. No, ma'am, we didn't steal anything. You gave her away. We just picked up what you threw out. Linda flinched like she'd been slapped. 5 years ago, this young woman was sitting alone in a restaurant on Thanksgiving because her own family told her she wasn't welcome. My wife invited her to our table. We fed her. We talked to her. We treated her like a human being. He stepped closer to Linda, his voice dropping. Do you know what she told us that night? She said she couldn't remember the last time she felt like she mattered to someone. 27 years old, and she couldn't remember ever feeling wanted by her own family. Linda opened her mouth. No sound came out. We didn't steal your daughter. We just showed her what family is supposed to look like. The rest was her choice. He turned to the gathered crowd. Now this is my daughter's wedding day, the happiest day of her life, and I won't let anyone ruin it. He nodded to the security guards. Then he put his arm around me. Callie is a Hartwell now, and Hartwells protect their own. This is what a father sounds like. Before the guards could lead them away, I held up my hand. Wait! Everyone froze. Linda looked at me with something like hope. I walked toward my biological parents, stopped an arm's length away. Mom, Dad, I don't hate you. Whatever she'd expected, that wasn't it. I don't hate you, I repeated. I've made peace with who you are. You're not villains. You're just people who couldn't love me the way I needed to be loved. People who chose comfort over fairness. People who let one daughter become invisible so the other could shine. Robert was crying again. Linda's face was a mask. But I've also made peace with who I am. And who I am is someone who deserves to be chosen, not as a backup, not as an afterthought, chosen first. I looked at them both, the parents I'd spent my childhood trying to please. You didn't choose me, they did. I gestured to the Hartwells. And I choose them. The room was silent. I'm not erasing you from my history. I'm just not giving you a seat at my table anymore. And that's not revenge. That's just the natural consequence of your choices. I nodded to security. Goodbye, Mom, Dad. As they were escorted out, the wedding guests began to applaud. Not for the drama. For me. The rest of the wedding was everything I'd hoped for. We danced, we laughed, we cut the cake while everyone cheered. Nathan twirled me around the dance floor until I was dizzy with joy. But the next morning, my phone started blowing up. Texts from cousins I hadn't heard from in years. Messages from aunts and uncles. The extended Brennan family had opinions. How could you do this to your mother? Family is family no matter what. I deleted them without responding. But then came a text from someone unexpected. My Aunt Diane, my father's younger sister. Callie, I heard what happened. I want you to know I'm proud of you. I always knew Linda and Amber treated you wrong. I tried to say something once and your mother stopped speaking to me for a year. But you deserved better. You always did. My eyes burned. I typed back, thank you. That means more than you know. That evening, I blocked every number and social media account connected to the Brennan family, not out of anger, out of peace. Nathan found me on the balcony of our honeymoon suite. You okay? I looked out at the vineyard spreading golden in the sunset. Yeah, I leaned into him. I really am. For the first time in my life, I wasn't carrying the weight of people who didn't want to carry me. I was finally free. 2 weeks after the wedding, a handwritten letter arrived. The return address said, Amber Brennan Collins. I almost threw it away unopened, but something made me sit down and read it. Dear Callie, I don't know if you'll read this. Mom told me what happened at your wedding. She's devastated. Dad hasn't been the same since. I know we haven't always had the best relationship, but you have to understand, Mom and Dad were just trying to keep the peace. I never meant for you to feel excluded. You always made everything so difficult, always asking questions, bringing up old hurts. It was exhausting. I'm not asking for an apology. I just wanted you to know that we still love you, even if you've decided we're not good enough for you anymore. Your sister, Amber, I read it twice. Then I folded it carefully and put it in a drawer. Nothing new. I stood up and started making dinner. She still doesn't get it, she never will. Does that bother you? No, I said finally. It's not my job to make her understand. It never was. A year after the wedding, life had settled into something beautiful. Nathan and I bought a house in the suburbs of Chicago, a little Cape Cod with a big backyard, just 20 minutes from Tom and Carol. Close enough for Sunday dinners, far enough for privacy. I was no longer freelancing. A design agency had hired me as their art director, a job I loved so much it barely felt like work. Nathan was thriving at his architecture firm. We were building a life together, literally and figuratively, and I was pregnant. Carol cried when we told her. Tom tried not to cry and failed. Daniel's kids were already arguing about who would be the baby's favorite cousin. One Sunday, Carol and I were setting up the nursery, painting the walls a soft sage green, arranging tiny furniture that seemed impossibly small. Have you thought about names? Carol asked. Emily, I said. If it's a girl, Emily Grace Hartwell. Carol's eyes welled up. The Hartwell part is non-negotiable. I smiled. I want her to have the name of the family that chose her mother. Carol pulled me into a hug. You know, when I saw you sitting alone in that restaurant, I had no idea we'd end up here. I just saw someone who needed kindness. You saved my life that night. No, sweetheart, you saved yourself. We just showed you it was possible. 5 years to the day after I sat alone at the Lakeside Grill, I sat at the head of a very different table. The Hartwell house was chaos. The best kind. Emily, now 6 months old, was being passed from lap to lap like a tiny drooling treasure. Daniel's kids were playing cards in the corner. Sarah was arguing with Nathan about carving the turkey. Tom was sneaking extra pie when he thought Carol wasn't looking. She was. All right, everyone. Carol clapped her hands. Before we eat, we need a toast. Callie, would you do the honors? I stood, Emily in my arms, and looked around the table at the family I'd found, the family that had found me. 5 years ago tonight, I said, I was sitting alone in a restaurant, wondering if I'd ever belong anywhere. I thought I was unlovable. I thought there was something wrong with me, that I was too much, too difficult, too dramatic. I paused, feeling Nathan's hand squeeze my knee under the table. Then a stranger named Carol Hartwell came up to my table and said, "No one should eat alone on this day." And everything changed. Tom wiped his eyes. Carol was already crying. So here's my toast. I raised my glass. To family, not the one we're born into, but the one we build. The one we choose. The one that chooses us back. To family, everyone echoed. Glasses clinked. Emily gurgled. Tom finally got his extra piece of pie. And I looked around at these people, my people, and felt something I'd spent my whole childhood chasing. I belonged, completely, unconditionally. For the first time in my life, I was home. After dinner, Nathan and I sat on the back porch with Emily asleep between us in her carrier. The November air was cold, but we were bundled in blankets, watching the stars emerge one by one. Do you ever think about them? Nathan asked quietly. Your bio parents. Sometimes, in the middle of the night mostly, I'll wonder how they're doing, if they ever really understood what they lost. Do you think they've changed? I shook my head slowly. People rarely do, not in the ways that matter. Does that make you sad? I looked at Emily, her tiny fist curled near her cheek, her perfect rosebud mouth, her chest rising and falling with each peaceful breath. It used to, I said, but not anymore. I spent so many years being sad about a family that didn't want me. I don't have room for that anymore. My life is too full. What changed? I did. I leaned into him. I stopped waiting for them to love me the way I needed. I stopped shrinking myself to fit into their version of who I should be, and I started building something new. Through the window, I could see the Hartwells, my family, laughing and talking, clearing plates and wrapping leftovers. Setting boundaries isn't revenge, I said softly. It's survival. It's choosing yourself when no one else will. I'm glad you survived. Me too, Emily stirred. I picked her up and held her close. I'll never make you earn my love, I whispered to her. I promise you'll never have to wonder if you're wanted. You'll always know." She yawned and fell back asleep. If you're watching this and you've been the scapegoat of your family, if you've been told you're too much, too sensitive, always causing drama just because you dared to ask to be treated fairly, I want you to know something. It's not you, it never was. You deserve to be chosen, not as a backup, not as a last resort, not as the acceptable sacrifice when someone else's comfort is at stake. Chosen first, chosen fully, chosen without conditions. Family isn't blood. Family isn't obligation. Family isn't people who share your DNA but treat you like a burden. Family is the people who show up, the people who see you crying alone at a restaurant table and invite you to join them. The people who open their Sunday dinners and their hearts and their legal documents to make you officially, permanently, undeniably theirs. I spent 27 years trying to earn love from people who were never going to give it. And then I spent 5 years learning what love actually looks like. If the people who are supposed to love you can't do that, if they've proven over and over again that you'll always come last, you have the right to build your own family. You have the right to walk away. You have the right to be happy. That's not revenge. That's not drama. That's just living your life without people who don't deserve a seat at your table. I found my people. And I hope with all my heart that you find yours, too. You deserve it. Thank you so much for being here until the very end. If my story touched you in any way, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. It really helps more people find these stories. Have you ever had to set boundaries with your own family? Share your experience in the comments. I read every single one. Until next time, remember, you deserve to be chosen.